Hey guys, did you know that I make a comic sometimes? Did you know that comic is getting published into an actual physical book? I know! I can't believe it either! Anyway, my comic is called Aurora. It's kinda high fantasy, high magic, superheroic-y sort of thing. Bunch of cool weirdos with weird powers teaming up to venture through an exciting world of magic and mystery and all that jazz. And the first 11 chapters of it are being consolidated into the first print volume, which is coming out at the end of July. If you'd like to pre-order that, I have a link in the description to give you a whole bunch of options that you could potentially pre-order it through. And if you're just curious and want to check it out, the entire comic can also be read online at comicaurora.com, or its mirror on Tumblr, which I made because the last time I mentioned this in a video, you guys all went at once and broke the website for like 2 entire weeks, and that was really scary. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy. Now on to the video you clicked on.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Castlevania detail diatribe. What is this, 3 now?
Another one, another one.
This trope, I like it. Another! But this one's about Nocturne, so it's different and special, because Nocturne, really good, turns out. Season 2 came out fairly recently at time of recording. I mean, like, you know, a month or 2 back, but like, in the grand scheme of things, very recently. Season 2 was real good, and then I watched back through Season 1 and Season 2 as a unit, and I was like, this is where the good was hiding. Because I liked Season 1, but I was like, this is all set up. We can't judge it. It's not done yet.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of people who were getting very snippy with it for like, I can't believe it ended on such an open note and we only got like 14 seconds of Alucard. And it's like, that's because it's Season 1. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I think when the first season came out, we were in this like, okay, this is Schrodinger's like good writing, bad writing, where we really don't know what to make of this until we see where it goes. And obviously, you know, the team dynamic is different because we are sans Alucard in the first season. But I think you and I were on record of like cautiously optimistic for where they would go in the second season of like, okay, we really liked the original Castlevania series, like this writing team knows what the hell they're doing. Clearly this is just the start. Give them a chance. Let's see what they do. And then season 2 came out, and it was not only a case of, oh, this is incredible, but you specifically went back and had the realization of, oh, no, this was actually a masterpiece the whole time. Once you understand what they're doing, season 1 becomes way better in retrospect. And your phrasing was that this might be your favorite show ever made now, like the best television show that exists.
Yeah, I was midway through the final battle in season 2, and I was like, this might be the best show that's ever been made. I don't know if I stand by that objectively speaking, but in the moment I was like, yeah, this fucking rules.
Castlevania by volume on this channel has gotten a lot of top billing, so it's easily up there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that I found interesting about rewatching Nocturne is that on my first pass through, I didn't love Richter as a character. I found him slightly tedious and his arc very predictable, because it's like, oh, he had magic, then he had trauma, and now we won't talk about it, and also he can't do magic. I wonder when he will get his magic back in a cool moment scored by an orchestral remix of a thing from the original games. And like, because I went into it with that, you know, trope-brained to the max, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, yep, here we go, yeah, okay, great, good. And now we can actually get fucking started. So like, that was kind of how I was feeling, and that's like halfway through the season, over halfway through the season. So then I was like, great, when are we gonna get to the good stuff? And then 14 seconds of Alucard, and then I had to wait for like 2 years. I was like, guys! Yeah. So it's a very different experience when you're like, now I have to wait for 2 years. But watching through the whole thing front to back, I was like, not only is this quite good, it was clearly planned out from the beginning. The number of things in season 2 that are direct pointed callbacks to season 1 tells me this whole thing was written in one go. It's a lot less sort of season to season than original Castlevania. And on that note, we should probably start bringing up some of the comparisons to original Castlevania, because of course Nocturne is very much in conversation with it, being a several generations later sequel series. So the audience is expected to have most likely watched Castlevania, at least loosely understand the premise we're going into and how we're going to be navigating this fun and funky new setting, which is why it's a little bit of a surprise when we go into this and it is aggressively historically set in a real historical interval of time where things were really happening.
They really upgraded the historical presentation of this one. I think I had been on record earlier of like the historical framing of Castlevania season 1 and 2 especially is really goddamn weird. That's not what this detailed diatribe is about, but it is like the implication of like 4 different historical settings kind of smushed into each other and like transposed onto Wallachia. But Nocturne is like, this is revolutionary France. And everything revolves around that. And it's like the right church for revolutionary France, which you could not say for late medieval Wallachia, where there's like, yeah, this would all be basically Orthodox, but we're gonna pretend it's like Catholic, and they're doing witch hunts from the 1600s.
Yeah.
You can deal with that, right? And it's like, I mean, yes, I can. but like it's better if it's actually like a thing
Yeah.
that corresponds to real history. So
yeah, that was when I was watching through season 1, even when I was a little shaky on it, I was like, Blue will like this a lot more than original Castlevania. Yeah, so Belmonts are back, and now because of Sypha, they can cast spells, which is pretty cool. Belmont punches now do actual appreciable damage against vampires. The historical setting is now a real historical setting. There are way more main characters to the point where it was almost a little overwhelming. Like, I think part of the reason season 1 felt a little bit strange in isolation is because we had like 8 people running around with important arcs all happening at once. And that was a lot of setup to do for, you know, not much time in the season to start paying it off. Everyone looks so gorgeous. The art style of this show is clearly derived from the art style of the original. I believe it's the same studio, but they're doing something with it that looks a lot more French. I don't know how to describe it because I don't have the art history.
It looks like the early 1900s French lithograph style, like a little bit of like the Toulouse-Lautrec kind of deal. Your mother would know this a lot better than me.
If only I paid more attention. But yeah.
But yeah, it is very much going for a little bit of that kind of like French lithograph, like pressed color block kind of vibe. And it looks really nice.
It does. And I think one of the largest changes from original Castlevania to Nocturne is that along with character theming and motivational foiling between the main characters and the main villains, there's no overarching narrative themes, which we're gonna get into. I mean, you already know what it is because you saw the title slide, but like we're gonna get into how we get there. So first things first, welcome to France, 1792. I had to do research for this part. I knew the French Revolution in broad strokes, but probably not more than baby's first world history class where it's like, and then they cut off a bunch of heads and now they're a republic. Yeah. But it's France. It's 1792 and the aristocracy is bleeding the poor dry in more ways than one. So in real historical news, this is the year the French Revolution ends the monarchy and then starts like multiple years of horrible bloody argument over what to do next. But in the funky fresh world of Castlevania, we get to focus on the comparatively much nicer and more chill world of just killing vampires. So Richter Belmont does the nice, morally uncomplicated work of fighting vampires that are trying to eat people, while his friend Maria works as a revolutionary, rallying the common folk to fight the vampires of a different sort, the aristocrats. What with their lifestyle of thriving in luxury off the backs of the working people, drained dry of all their money and life, and etc., etc. It also helps that the aristocrats are mostly also vampires.
Yeah.
So it's pretty convenient, all things considered.
It's nice that they're setting it in this moment in the Revolution. I mean, this is like the moment to set a story in the Revolution because storming of the Bastille is 1789, and then Reign of Terror begins with the guillotining of the king. Spoilers.
We see that happen in the show.
We do. In 1793, and those 4 years are like the Revolution is happening, but it hasn't like happened. It's still ongoing, and there's a very clear sense, like in season 1, they really do show like there are pockets of like monarchists and pockets of revolutionaries across the country, and you know Paris is where the revolution has happened most ardently, most fervently. So it's like, you know, there's where the vampires aren't really going because that's where all the revolutionary stuff is happening.
Yeah.
But in like the countryside, the
town of
villas,
Machina,
the chateaus and stuff. Yeah. Machina is kind of like a monarchist pocket out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it also handily starts the story off sidestepping some of the very easy tropes because the simplified narrative of the French Revolution is, yeah, and then they cut off the king's head and there were no more kings and everything was good. Categorically not what happened, but it's a really easy story to tell of like, and then the common people rose up and through the power of friendship and teamwork and collaborative effort and a lot of motivational speeches, they won. And like, that's a very easy story to tell. And the fact that this story is like, that happened 3 years ago, and everyone is still kind of figuring out what the world is going to look like next.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really consider this, but it's kind of funny to put that in conversation with, hey, Dracula's already dead. What are we doing here? We already won. What do you mean there's more Castlevania?
Yeah.
So, in conversation with France 1792, also starring Annette and Edouard, straight out of Saint-Domingue and the beginnings of the Haitian Revolution, another real historical thing that was happening exactly now.
A change from the original games.
Yes.
Annette is a white lady.
Yeah.
And they made the choice to have a different important part of the world of the 1790s happening in this by making Annette and Edouard Haitian.
Yeah.
Really cool choice. Very smart change.
Yeah, I think it does a ton to really strengthen the theming. In the real historical context, this was a successful slave rebellion against the French colonialist plantation owners in the island of Saint-Domingue. It's one of history's only and most successful slave rebellions, and it literally just turned into the Haiti that now exists. It was the largest slave rebellion since Spartacus, and Spartacus didn't even win. So, like, this was huge. It worked, and it scared the shit out of a lot of people who needed to be scared shitless that century, because the people of Saint-Domingue were, like, seeing the way the wind was blowing over in Europe, but the people in America were also seeing that, and they were, like, sort of tightening the screws. They were like, okay, everyone's talking about freedom, liberty, equality, fraternity, but, like, we can't let these guys have any ideas. And, like, the free black people of Saint-Domingue were like, okay, we see where this is going too. So Edouard's role as a freeborn Haitian borderline aristocrat being like, okay, yeah, it's more important that I help my fellow enslaved people than that I, just kind of rest on my French silks and live in luxury. This is a real historical narrative that very easily could have just played out. I mean, minus the magic and the vampires and such.
Minus that, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I think is so cool about all these character premises is like the presence of vampires did not appreciably change the history from the way it was already structured. Also, Annette's mentor, Cecile, is a real historical figure who was really one of like the two people who organized and started the burning of the plantations in the revolution. So I did think her character design was a little more detailed than everybody else's. I was like, she's very specific in an interesting way. And then I looked up her portrait and I was like, oh, she literally just looked like that. Okay.
Yeah. It's like in the original Castlevania series, you can tell that they started paying more attention to like what the shape of the world should be like as they went on. The cities that they depict don't look anything like their real life counterparts in like seasons 1 and 2, like Targovishta, Grezhit, like no fucking way.
No.
The cathedral of Targovishta is way the hell tinier and is an Orthodox cathedral. It is not a giant like,
opulent turbo Catholic.
Like Space Marine ass looking thing like it is in the show. But as they go on, Isaac goes to Genoa, and it's like, yeah, that looks believable. Like Isaac goes to Tunis, and it's like, yeah, that looks they look like they're doing the right things.
Yeah.
They try more intensely as the show goes on to create a more believable world. And in this, the jump is very apparent because if you're making a French Revolutionary story, it's very easy to just kind of parrot like the storm of the Bastille, kill the king, yada yada yada, Robespierre, and they get Robespierre in there, but like going the extra step of like, and it's important to recognize the worldwide forces at play here.
Yeah.
And looking at the French world beyond just like metropolitan, the hexagon of France, into the Caribbean, and seeing like, oh yeah, no, Haiti is an important part of the story. You don't get that in the story unless the people writing it actually like give a shit and know what they're doing. So like, credit to the team that put this together. If you're a historian, it's like, well, of course, that's an obvious choice. You have to include Haiti. It's essential. It's like, yes, it is. But in most stories, it is completely brushed over because it's like, oh, it's so far away. It's not relevant. It's different. But
Haiti and France have the same national motto for a reason. They're the only two countries. Liberty, equality, fraternity is the national motto, and it's because of this. And speaking as the resident non-historian, I knew about the Haitian Revolution, but mostly because I had accidentally stumbled across it while doing fantasy world-building research at one point. It wasn't a major point in any of the world history classes that I took. And like, yeah, ignorant American, blaming the schooling system. I'm just saying, the fact that the show was like, this was happening, and we're gonna trust that the audience can like do their homework and Google if they're confused. It was a real thing. I don't need to baby you and only show you the obvious stuff that's on the first 10 pages of your textbook. And I thought that was cool. So we get Annette and Edouard bringing in a completely different paradigm, a revolution that's further along and at this point more successful than the French Revolution, which has taken Paris but is still struggling to figure itself out and get its shit in order. And the end result is that every character is interacting with this core theme of revolution and freedom in a very interesting and different, but in conversation with each other, way. Also, the guy who enslaved Annette and her mother is a vampire, so we're starting to notice a trend here. And that trend is that vampirism makes an extremely clean metaphor for basically every system of exploitation that our heroes have already been fighting against at this point. The structure of it to sustain one's life at the cost of another's just works extremely well as an analogy for slave ownership, and on a less overtly violent and tortuous level, aristocrats and monarchy over in France. The idea that any one person gets to sustain themselves and their lifestyle at the tangible, painful cost to others is treated in this show as a form of vampirism, and therefore something that is innately exploitative and and cruel and fucked up and evil, which, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not complicated, but it is slightly complicated by the fact that also vampires are like just real actual people in this show. And while colonialist and classist systems are by their nature vampiric, being a literal actual vampire does not automatically make you a colonizing bastard, because equating those two things too strongly runs a couple interesting risks, and one of them is the everything bad in history was done by vampires approach, which in a show this historically grounded is a very dangerous precedent to try and set, because a lot of the events that happened in French Revolution and in Saint-Domingue were very much based on real human cruelty and exploitation of people that were seen as lesser, and like that is a fucked up thing that really happened, and it's a fucked up thing that we need to be aware of as a trap that people can fall into to learn to see other people as not people. And then if a show comes in and is like, huh, all those bad guys were evil vampires, it's like, oh, thank goodness, humans are fine then. It's like, no, hold on. And the show's very aware of this and is trying very hard not to fall into that trap. Because while vampirism is colonialism and vampirism is exploitation is a very clean metaphor, we don't want to fall into like D&D issues and make an entire category of people that are all categorically evil, which is, you know, and the show's aware of this. In episode 1, Richter and Maria even have a little conversation about like, oh, we kill vampires because they're evil and it's fun to do it. And then they sort of have to fucking eat their words a little bit later. But every time anyone in the show tries to draw a solid distinction between humans and vampires, of like, oh, well, this is a property that humans have and vampires don't, or this is a thing vampires do and humans don't, the show goes out of its way to disprove it pretty handily. The most tangible one of those is that the abbot believes that humans have souls and vampires don't. But this is categorically disproven at the beginning of season 2 when Drolta, who is a vampire, who got killed at the end of season 1 by Alucard, is resurrected as a night creature with her soul, memory, and personalities intact, which is probably the cleanest way they could have proven that vampires straight up just have souls.
Yeah, it does apply back to the kind of like colonialist idea of we are the people who are people and have souls, and those guys over there aren't, and therefore we can be evil and kill them. So
exactly.
Like, Richter even falling into a little bit of the like, yes, well, we're the good guys because of how we were born. It's like, want to examine that, buddy? Your French accent's coming off a little strong on that one.
Yeah, Richter lives in a very simple world, and he doesn't really know how to interact with this much more complicated one, so it's nice for him that there are also just vampires coming out of the trees trying to kill innocent French people, and he's like, all right, great, something to kill, amazing.
Yeah, let's reinforce all my biases. But no, it's good that they don't lean into that 100%, because it ends up like tripping back into like a funky bioessentialism.
Exactly, and you know, given that the show is so dedicated to showcasing that like personhood and autonomy and freedom are universal rights, it would be kind of fucked up if they were like, but also these are the things that you can just kill and feel nothing. So one of the highlighting points of that is Maria's mother, Tara, who at the end of season 1 sacrifices herself to save Maria and become a vampire in her place. And there's this question, because we've never actually seen in all the seasons of original Castlevania, we never saw anybody become a vampire. She becomes a vampire and she's still her. Like, she's kind of scary and, you know, an absolute ass kicker because she's got like vampire super speed and healing factor and stuff. But like, she has the exact same personality. She still hates the fuck out of Erzsebet. Her first act is setting her on fire, which is really funny. So this proves, okay, somebody can be vampirized, but they retain their free will. Just about the only thing that happens is she does have to drink blood now, which is fucked up and she doesn't love. But Olrox brings this up as just like, hey, you know, it's a thing. We have to do it. You can't resist the thirst for long, and you should probably take care of that before you go and see your daughter, which is fair. And on that note, Olrox is a vampire, a very powerful one, and he is extremely anti-colonialist since he's Aztec and he remembers the last time this shit happened.
Yeah.
He even brings up that his vampirism was an act of violence from the Spaniards during the destruction of Tenochtitlan. It's another thing they brought from the old world with them. So he's not a fan of Erzsebet. He's not a fan of this whole empire plan thing. He's not a fan of any of the other vampires. And he works behind the scenes to sabotage Erzsebet at every possible opportunity. And of course, there's Alucard, who embodies the blurring of the line between human and vampire because he is half human, half vampire, and he works just fine. And he also says outright that vampires are no more proficient at evil than humans are. He's known humans that are far worse than some vampires. Not every evil in history is a case of vampires did it.
Alucard is a fan of my second detailed diatribe thesis, the human face of evil about Castlevania. He knows exactly what I was getting at there. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, he clearly watched up and did his homework. And it's interesting. There's a conversation between Alucard and Maria at the beginning of season 2 where she's trying to wrap her head around the fact that her mother is now a vampire. Because again, her and Richter had a very sort of childish attitude towards this. Like, vampires are monsters to be killed. world, and that's fun. And now she's like, my mother is one, what do I do? And she talks to Alucard because Alucard's dad is a vampire. How did that work out? She's like, oh, do you think that love can redeem vampires? And he's like, I think if anything can redeem anybody, it's probably gonna be love. But again, like, every time someone tries to draw a distinction or imply that vampires are in some way innately terrible, in some unique way, innately inborn evil, he's like, no, hey, stop. Careful. Humans can be just as bad, if not worse. And honestly, the only thing with vampires is that they have to drink blood, and like, that is the nature of the vampiric curse, but they don't have to kill people by doing it. This is a thing that we've seen over and over again, is that a vampire can drink from somebody without outright killing them. So like, there are ways to do this that don't involve murder. The murder is always a choice. They managed to walk a pretty careful line here with, you know, vampirism as a metaphor for colonialism without simultaneously vilifying all vampires and physical, actual fantasy vampirism in and of itself.
And it's a very careful balance of putting the right questions in the mouths of the right characters so it doesn't come off as exposition where, like, Alucard looks to camera and says in his sultry voice, like, you see, actually humans are the real dickheads here. It all feels correct in character, but still, like, collectively goes towards explaining the shape of this world.
Yeah. For a character-driven show like this, I think that they needed to do a lot of work to make sure that every individual character at each point in the story had the right set of biases, ignorances, and just general things that they weren't sure of, so that they could ask questions of people who did know what was up. And even the thing with Maria having this bias against vampires, it makes perfect sense because she got that from Tara. Like, we learn that, that Tara, her little sister, was abducted by Erzsebet Bathory and like tortured horribly and killed and turned into a vampire. And when Tara learned that, she mercy killed her sister, fucking booked it out of a window and kept running until she hit France. Like, that's heartbreaking. But then, like, oh, she becomes a vampire and she's definitely still her. And like, you gotta wonder if she was like, oh, fuck, did I not have to kill my sister? Oh no. It doesn't get directly approached, but like, we know that for her, from her perspective, becoming a vampire was a worse than death sentence. And then when she has to deal with it, she's a little bit kind of thrown. But yes, all of this to set up and establish what we're working with here, that the show, the story of this urban fantasy vampire killing adventure, and the real historical context of the French and Haitian revolutions happening simultaneously, they all have the exact same theme, which is laced through every element of the writing, and that is literally written on the subway walls: no gods, no masters. And we're gonna spend the rest of this unpacking all the different ways that shows up.
Tiny bit of historical context. I was looking this up before we started recording. Ni Dieu ni maître is a expression that was kind of concocted in the 1800s, late 1800s, because the French Revolution, there are like 9 of them, really.
Yeah,
and
they were all arguing.
The ideas expressed through the revolution kind of carried over. So it became an anarchist theme, a labor movement theme, an anti-capitalist theme in later centuries, anti-corporal punishment theme. And it didn't really exist at this point in the history, but it is a very clever thing to kind of like retroject back into here, because it's very plausible to be the kinds of things that someone would write, even though this specific phrasing didn't show up until like a century after. Again, it shows they did the research of bringing in something like this, even though it wasn't really attested as having existed in this point in time. It's more true to the idea, even if it's not necessarily accurate to the fact, and I think that's an important distinction.
I was gonna say, there's a couple other points where the show made similar decisions, and one of them is the inclusion of like the French Revolution just having like women kicking ass in it, because the real historical French Revolution was again doing like fraternity. It means boys only, ladies. Like, like women's liberation was far behind it and being actively suppressed at this point, because the women were like, hey, shouldn't we be allowed to like get our equal representation when we're helping you boys do all this work? And they were like, no. Shut up. So I like that the show was like, fuck you. Maria's wearing pants and there's a female revolutionary captain who's a hugely important player in season 2, and we're not even going to address it because you can excuse vampires, but you draw the line at us making this a little bit cleaner.
But my realism.
My realism. Okay, so let's start with no gods, because strangely, it's probably the less fraught one of these. So there are multiple points in this show where somebody waits for a god's help or makes themselves subservient to what they believe is the god's will. And whenever they do this, the god does not intervene to help them. Either the god is unwilling or unable to do so, or their existence is in flux. Basically, nobody ever gets an unprompted Deus Ex Machina just because they're waiting for it. And there are a bunch of interesting examples of this. One of them comes up in season 1 when Olrox is explaining to Mizrak what happened when the Spaniards took Tenochtitlan and burned the place to the ground and slaughtered his people in the millions. He mentions, oh, you know, the Aztecs, we worship these terrifying gods, and when that happened, they did nothing to save us, which is sad. Very.
Yeah.
Olrox, you know, hot take, Olrox is probably the best character in the show. He's got the best attitude, he's got the best one-liners, and also he has the most profoundly tragic personal arc in the way that he and Mizrak interact, which I just think is really interesting. Drolta, we get some focus on in season 2, because in season 1 she mentions that she used to be a priestess of Sekhmet.
Priestess of Sekhmet in the, like, 1100s AD is also kind of wonky, but, like, we'll give it a pass. We'll give it a pass.
We'll give it a pass. And her temple is attacked, and people inside are slaughtered, and one of the attackers turns out to be a vampire. And she interprets this as an act from Sekhmet, that the vampire was sent to her so that she can strengthen herself and turn her into something that will now be strong enough to fight. The Drolta is a very interesting character. She has always been kind of strength obsessed from her characterization in season 1. And then in season 2, when we see her in the beginning, she's doing her funerary rites over Sekhmet's mummy, and then she's talking about, like, you know, I don't know if we can do this. We're so few, so tired. Please give me the strength. And then the vampire attacks. She's like, ooh, strength conveniently bottled just for me. She becomes a vampire, and then she keeps, you know, upgrading herself, you know, real shonen villain, this isn't even my final form style. And then when she comes face to face with Sekhmet's other soul in the finale, we'll get there, Sekhmet calls her an unclean abomination and is disgusted and horrified by everything she's done in her name, including turning her priesthood into vampires, feeding her soul to a vampire. So this is all very, you know, upsetting for Drolta and pretty cathartic for the audience. But it also means that when the temple was attacked and everyone was slaughtered, Sekhmet didn't do shit. She was a little too dead, or a little too uninterested, probably just too dead, to do anything to intervene and save Drolta. The vampire was just a terrible thing that happened to her, not a sign from her goddess.
Yeah.
So that's sad, again. And to complete the trifecta, the abbot, who is of course big into Big J and the homies, he believes that at the end of season 1, so the setup for this is basically in season 1, Erzsebet is like, I don't think that abbot likes me very much. We should do something to really buy his loyalty forever by basically make him sunk cost fallacy his way into this. And she's basically like, you should sacrifice something to me, something you love. Ooh. And the abbot is like, oh God, won't you help me out of this one, man? I've done so much good work in your name. And then Maria shows up and is like, hey, the church is going to get attacked and I don't want you dying in it because I've never had a dad and it would be kind of nice to have one. And he's like, oh, Maria, truly God has sent you to me so I can stab you with this knife. And he's so fucking stupid. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
So he's reciting the scripture of Abraham sacrificing his son. This whole time he's setting up to sacrifice Maria. But of course, in that story, when Abraham was going to do it, he's like, okay, I'm really going to do it. And God's like, okay, that's enough. Here, have a ram. Sacrifice that to me instead. Don't actually kill your kid. Fratricide is very bad. We don't do that in this house. But the abbot is like, I'm doing everything right. Why isn't God intervening to stop me from killing my child? This should be happening.
I've lined up the sniper shot so well. Why isn't God stopping me?
In the name of thematic consistency, my lord. So this is just a really interesting theme and microcosm of the fact that anytime any of these characters essentially sacrifices their own agency and waits for the gods to save them, stop them, make their decisions for them, nothing happens. The rest is silence. It does not work.
It also makes the fact that Olrox transforms into a big Quetzalcoatl-like feathered serpent that much more thematic, because he's like, well, if you're not gonna fucking do it, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, all right. I see no god up here other than me. There is one character who does get some confirmed divine intervention, but I think the way that they do it still proves that I'm right. Of course, that character is Annette. In the second season, she travels into the spirit world in search of Sekhmet's third soul. Another thing the show wobbles around a little bit is the way that they cover the Egyptian anatomy of the soul. They're like, oh, the Ba is in the heart and the Ka is in the blood, or one of those, and neither of those are correct. And then they're like, oh, and there's the third soul, the Akh, which they thought was the good soul. And it's like, well, kind of, but you make the Akh by combining the Ba and the Ka, and it's whatever.
And P is stored in the balls. Yeah. We've heard it before.
Oh, fuck. So basically, we have a MacGuffin hunt. We need to get the third Sekhmet. We need to find her in the spirit world, and Annette is the only one we know who can go into the spirit world, so she has to go in there, even though she doesn't really know shit about Sekhmet, except that she's loosely an Egyptian goddess, not one of her gods, doesn't really know the deal. So she travels into the spirit world and basically finds her way to the gods directly. And the first one that she goes to is the Orisha Ogun, who is hanging out in the spirit world at his forge, and because she made her way to him, he arms her with a shield and a corresponding magical defense that she can use. But she asks if he can take her to Sekhmet, and he's like, no, I can't. Gods don't cross into each other's domains, but I'll help you the way I can by giving you the tools you need to get there. And then she has to do some more spirit journey fighting stuff, and then she finally finds Sekhmet's soul. And Sekhmet is not happy that she's there and initially tries to kill her. And Annette basically explains what's going on and is like, you need to stop them from using your other souls to do this. It'll get your soul back in balance and you won't get dragged into the fire and die again, I guess. And basically gives her body to Sekhmet to use as a vessel in the real world, while Annette fights to defend the resting place of Sekhmet's soul in the spirit world. So both of these cases of divine intervention are Annette goes to them and says, hey, I'm gonna do this anyway. Can you help? And the god is like, yes, here's what we're gonna do. There's also one little moment when Annette's soul is returning to her body, and Ogun intervenes briefly to help her on her way. But again, all he's doing is guiding her along the return journey that she's already making. This basically locks in that these gods literally help only those who are actively at that moment helping themselves. None of these guys make the decisions for her. She's the one who's making the decision, and then they're going along with it. These gods are more like tools than they are masters, which is, I guess, it's always funny when I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. And then I'm like, oh yeah, slideshow maybe thought so too. Every other character who talks about their gods are in some way exempting themselves from the responsibility of their actions by waiting for the gods to intervene on their behalf. Annette is the only one of them who approaches their gods from a standpoint of intentional action and only asks for help in doing what she's already going to try to do anyway. And this makes sense. Annette is the character in the show with the most, she's had the most time to think about this and the most time to lock in her philosophy on life, in that she accepts no masters and no mastery, not even gods. And so when she asks, the gods are there to help her out.
And I think this follows pretty cleanly from some of what was established, I guess, more indirectly in the first show, because my favorite line in the whole first series is "God isn't here."
God is not
when
here.
the priest of Targovishta, or the bishop or whatever, is being evil. It's like, you can't come in here. My God's supposed to stop you, and it's like, no, bitch.
Well, but here I am.
It's not part of a cohesive thesis. It's just kind of a statement early in the show that, like, religion exists, magic is real, and it goes all the way up to, like, full divinity.
Holy
it's
empowerment really works. Gods are real. This is the show that highlights, like, it's not just, you know, Big J in the ambiguous, cloudy heaven sky. It's also other gods.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I liked about the original series, is that it's willing to be like, okay, yes, this is the show that takes place mostly in, like, Wallachia and stuff, but there is a whole world out there and everybody's got vampires, everyone's got their own stuff going on. But I like the idea of, like, God isn't here kind of presaging a little bit of this, where it's like, the gods do exist, they're just not here. They're not going to help you. They're not going to do your work for you, because otherwise, one, there wouldn't be a show, but two, thematically, it wouldn't really work very well. So,
and the alternate timeline where divine intervention works and every vampire is just immediately struck by lightning after spawning.
Yeah, exactly. It follows very cleanly. You can tell that the thesis is a lot more developed here, for sure.
Yeah.
But I do like that there is that through line going back to the first season of the original show.
It's fun. Again, it's really nice when I watch a show like this with a thesis in mind, and everywhere I look, I just get more correct. But yes, on the subject of no masters, one interesting thing to start with when we start this show is just the age-old, frankly extremely relevant question to many real-world systems of power and oppression. If it's so natural, why is it so hard for you to enforce it? Nobody needs to put in this much work enforcing the fucking law of gravity. Why do we need to make so many people suffer to make this quote-unquote natural order exist?
Gravity Police sounds like a Monty Python skit.
You know, it does, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
someone write it.
So someone get on that. Fan Art Desk Monday. So in this show, Erzsebet and her various lackeys talk a very big game about how the rule of vampires is the natural order TM, while actively working across the centuries to do a tremendous amount of effort to slowly gather enough power to harness Sekhmet's soul and induce a permanent artificial eclipse so the vampires can actually go outside for more than half of the day without exploding. And a natural order that requires continuous violent enforcement isn't natural in any way that matters. It's not self-perpetuating, it's not self-sustaining, it will constantly be resisted. And the cool thing about this is that they figured this out in the original show. This was kind of the entire underpinning of season 3, when it's Carmilla and the evil girl boss squad figuring out what they're going to do next, where Striga and Morana concluded that Carmilla's plan to pen in an entire country of humans and use them as livestock wasn't impossible for them to enforce, but it would be a horrible, exhausting mess to maintain because the humans would always fight back. They'd be giving these powerless humans nothing to lose, and like even if they could kill all of them, they would lose a lot in the process. They would never have time for each other or for anything else. It would be a horrible, exhausting mess. And by making the humans desperate and, you know, trapping them so completely, they wouldn't break their will. They would just have to constantly keep trying to fight them back. And like, you know, and each individual human is not all that powerful, especially not when facing somebody like Striga, but it doesn't matter because there's so fucking many of them.
Yeah, and it's just constant.
It's constant.
Also, it's like, if vampires at the top of the world's food chain really was the natural order, God wouldn't have made you sunlight soluble, honey. You're not the alpha in this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this whole argument is that anytime someone's like, well, this is the natural order, is like, well, actually, this is the natural order. It's like, guys, things just happen. There doesn't. The idea of a natural order is usually just there to justify an existing system of power that is convenient for somebody. The argument being like, oh, well, actually, the natural order is for vampires to catch fire is like, yeah, but, you know, also, maybe nothing of a natural order really should have any bearing on how people get to live their lives. Maybe we should all have the individual freedom to choose. We just reinvented the damn revolution again. Yeah. Oh, nobody could see, but I dabbed when I said on fire. So, No Masters shows up in a lot of different ways in this show, because the show is covering a lot of ground, you know, history, fantasy, character-driven. So, let's start with the history. The No Masters thesis is extremely prominent and extremely obvious in all of the revolutions that are put forward in this show. The idea that enslavement of any kind is profoundly wrong is 2/3 of the most famous motto of the French Revolution. They had a bunch, but this is the one that won out, which is, of course, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternity, freedom, equality, brotherhood. It serves as a major motivation for Maria, Annette, and Edouard, as well as every other revolutionary in the series, and it basically boils down to the idea that everyone is equal in their right to freedom. Nobody has the right to be anyone else's master. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are, it doesn't matter who your parents are, nobody has the right to control anyone else. And in this show, anyone who tries to command anyone else is unequivocally an antagonist. And any system of power that violates the tenet of equality and claims anyone has the right to rule anyone else's life is equally vilified. The thing is, oftentimes when this is put forward, people are like, oh, so you just want anarchy where everyone gets to do whatever they specifically want forever? And it's like, there is a middle ground between that and the systems of enslavement and classism that were centuries old.
If you can't see the middle ground between enslavement and anarchy, that's a you guys problem.
Yeah. So, that's interesting.
That's a straw man.
Yes, and to blow away in the wind. So fortunately, the historical side of this is pretty well-trodden ground, pretty simple. The show doesn't go out of its way to relitigate all that much of it, because it seems to think it's much more interesting to apply this principle to the more fantastical or character-driven elements of the show, and I agree with it. So let's start with the fantasy element, because I think they do some really interesting stuff with it in this show, especially in conversation with the first Castlevania series, because the first Castlevania series established a quote-unquote natural hierarchy where vampires control humans by being inhumanly fast undead predators that treat humans like food or pets or both, and humans control night creatures by magically forging damned souls into monstrous loyal servants. So essentially, the fantasy world-building rules as given is that the natural order of the world is that vampires are the boss fights, and night creatures are the slaves of anybody who controls them. And Nocturne looked at this and said social construct, and honestly, tremendously based.
Failure of imagination. The explanation in the original series is that, like, it requires a human touch. You have the connection of a soul to a soul in order to forge and then control night creatures. Yeah. I guess the difference is, like, either no one in the... Well, clearly, it was constructed that way because they only thought of it that way. They weren't writing a revolutionary storyline in the first Castlevania series, so it makes sense that it's like, it's clean, it fits what that story was going for.
Exactly.
And, like, in untangling, like, the possible plot hole of, oh, well, why can this happen now? It's like, well, the apparatus for forging night creatures is way the hell more complicated now.
Yeah.
Like, Isaac and Hector had a little hammer and a knife. It's like, okay, we're in just pre-Renaissance times here. Whereas the abbot has this whole fucking steampunk monstrosity in his basement with all these, like, bells and pipes and whistles and things.
Yep.
And also, he's the only one who's been insane enough to try it and probably not, like, explode in the process.
Well, it's interesting. There's actually some precedent in the original Castlevania for the idea that the night creatures are not just this, like, mindless slave race of you know, generic respawning monsters. Because...
Yeah, Fly's Eyes.
Yeah, because Isaac, he starts trying to talk to them. And, like, it seems like the main problem with a lot of night creatures is just that they don't have, like, the vocal apparatus to form words. Most of them have big fangs or maws, or, like, they shoot super jets of water or some So Fly's Eyes has a mouth that can kind of work, so he can talk. And he's like, yeah, I remember remember being, you know, an Athenian philosopher, getting tortured to death for not being a Christian, and then winding up in hell because I also betrayed my fellows in the process of trying not to get tortured to death. And that's kind of fucked up, don't you think? But like, we've already established that night creatures are not just demons, they are transmuted human souls who retain memories of their past lives, and it is possible for them to come back. And there's also the guy, the night creature in season 3 that's arranging for the portal to the infinite corridor to open and all that shit. So like, night creatures clearly have agency and direction in some way, but for the most part, we only see them as mindless cannon fodder monsters in the original show.
With really cool designs.
Really cool designs. Mostly to explain how all this other weird shit from the games got in here.
Yeah.
So the thing that happens in this show, similar to the way that we explore the humanity of vampires through Terra becoming one, we explore night creatures through Edward becoming one, tragically getting fucking axed in like the first major combat encounter. Poor guy. But then he comes back as a suspiciously gorgeous night creature, and it's like, oh, that guy's for sure still a main character.
You fool, you made him hotter.
Yeah, you idiot. The vampires as masters of the world thing gets pretty steadily unraveled. Part of it is that it's explicitly stated in Nocturne that vampires kind of have to keep playing nice with the human rulers of any given world, and it kind of bothers them. They're like, oh, they need to infiltrate the aristocracy, they need to make nice with the kings, because fundamentally speaking, vampires are terribly vulnerable, what with the sunlight and such.
Yeah.
And presumably one Belmont per generation, and occasionally randomly showing up to kick their fangs in. It's really interesting. The attitude of all the vampires in this show is kind of like the way I've heard the American middle class described as temporarily embarrassed billionaires, you know?
Yeah.
The idea that like, well, I should be this beautiful, wealthy, gallivanting around the world on my private jet person, and I'll get there, you know, just I'm temporarily embarrassed, you know? And these vampires are like, we obviously should be in charge of everything. It's just a slight hiccup that we all have to hide in basements during the day and we can't really do anything except at night. So they're like, oh, the natural order is when we are completely in charge. And Annette's like, are you stupid? The sun rising is literally the most natural thing that happens.
Yeah, we were joking about gravity, but apply that to gravitational planets and spinning and shit, and you get, sunrises.
Yeah. You know, it's a little touch. They don't really highlight it very much, but when Erzsebet starts doing her ominous orb magic, I think what she's doing is basically pulling up a model of the solar system and moving it the way she wants it to, because it's not just the central orb, it's like some orbs spinning around other orbs, and it's like, that's probably planets and moons. So what she's doing is literally moving the moon into position to create this eclipse, which I think is cool.
Gravity police.
Gravity police! Quick, get her, boys! But the idea that, oh, the vampires are the natural bosses, like, this is highlighted as not true and kind of just like mass cope on the part of guys who are now allergic to 50% of being alive.
Getting a lot of boss vampire vibes, says vampire who's only ever seen vampires in power.
Oh, God. Yeah, it's even brought up in a little candid conversation between Olrox and Drolta that, like, all vampires feel terror at the approach of sunrise. You know, this far stronger, dispassionate force of nature that will just absolutely dog walk them if they look at it funny.
Yeah. It's like humans are squishy, but like vampires only need to fuck up once and they're just done.
Yeah. And also, while Belmonts have always been able to make vampires look like chumps, the rest of humanity has come a long way since Trevor's day, and pretty much every protagonist is more than capable of taking out at least one or two jobber vampires in hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
All vampires have some variety of super speed and all that jazz, but that doesn't seem to be doing them much good against the supposed lesser humans, even the ones without magic, like Edward. I mean, like, look, yes, he does die first, but he does kill a bunch of vampires before that happens, and he just has a sword and, like, a positive attitude.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, night creatures are supposed to be mindless cannon fodder for vampire lords to weaponize from the back of their giant castle. But even as far back as Isaac's time, he was making the effort to talk to them and learn more about them, and it was clear that they weren't mindless, and the mechanism by which they followed the orders of the person who forged them was never really clear. And now, in the show, when Edward dies in Combat Encounter 1 and comes back as an unreasonably hot night creature, it becomes pretty clear that there is actually nothing natural or inevitable about the enslavement of night creatures. Because if there is a human soul in there and a human mind that can think, it's gonna want to be free. Especially if it's Edward, who already, again, made this decision years ago. He's like, okay, cool, back on track. Let's see, he even has this really interesting conversation with Olrox, where Olrox is like, there's like a human soul in there. How'd that happen? What's going on, unreasonably sexy night creature? And Edward is like, I don't know what's going on. on, I don't know who I am, but I want my freedom. And Olrox is like, don't we all? And it's like, yeah, hell yeah, brother.
Yeah.
It's really interesting watching Edouard slowly regain his memory of who he is just by basically sort of feeling out what does and doesn't feel right for him. He's like, okay, I am enslaved. That feels wrong. We're like, okay, hold on, I know that person, and she's about to get killed by that thing. That feels wrong, I'll kill that thing first. And then that's why he gets put in night creature gay baby jail. And, you know, the other thing that comes very naturally to him is singing, because he's an opera singer, and as he sings, it seems like he doesn't just remember more of who he is as he sort of feels it out through the song, it also makes the other people around him remember who they are by inspiring, you know, feelings in them. There's no tool more powerful for inspiring sensation and emotion than song, and it seems like Edouard's music is never implied to be like actually magic by the rules of Castlevania. It truly seems like it's just the organic homegrown magic of songs and words can inspire people to be brave and to dream.
Yeah.
Even, you know, even in a completely normal, non-fantastical setting. And the show is pretty clear that, like, there is no tangible distinction between night creature Edouard and human Annette and vampire Terra. Vampires are not above humanity, night creatures are not below it. There is no natural order. There are no natural masters.
That's what I think is the difference that they get to. They were kind of implying it with the setup of the night creatures in the original series, but here that clean line of breaking the hierarchy of like night creatures, humans, vampires, they were all humans. It's just, did something happen to you or not?
Yeah.
You still have a soul. You still are the foundation of what you were before you got turned into night creature or vampire at the end of the day. I remember after the first season when we were talking about how we enjoyed it, one of our patrons was like, yeah, I'm actually like friends with the person who voices Edouard.
Oh,
we're like,
hell
tell
yeah.
them they're the coolest, please, from us.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that guy rules. So Edouard's transmutation and, you know, fight for freedom, and the night creature's freedom in general, is the entire focus of Edouard's arc, and it becomes very prominent in season 2 when more night creatures are forged to refill the army after it got sliced up at the end of season 1. Edouard, once and forever a revolutionary with a knack for inspiring others through his words and songs, kind of thrives in his new situation. Like, he has the opportunity to be rescued at the end of season 1. He's like, no, Annette, my place is here. Don't worry, I got this. And he does. He does got this.
It's enrichment, Annette, don't worry.
I've been so bored not having anybody to radicalize. But he starts reaching out to his fellow night creatures, mostly the ones with like faces that can talk and such, and encouraging them to recall what used to matter to them and to decide for themselves whether or not they accept their current fate as slaves to Erzsebet's will. And this is an interestingly uphill battle because while most of these guys were revolutionaries before their transformation, most of them initially remember dying horribly the last time they fought for their freedom against Erzsebet.
Yeah.
So while they don't like being transformed into monsters and enslaved to her will, most of them are a little bit scared of dying twice, you know, second dying.
Yeah. We've had death once, yes.
And a lot of focus is put on this revolutionary captain who's killed by Drolta and then resurrected as what is apparently a stock enemy in the games that fires a 3 ice spike attack.
Oh, interesting. I was wondering if it's like a little Statue of Liberty kind of like dealio.
No,
Obviously it didn't exist yet, but I was like, if that's kind of like what they were channeling the vibe of. But it makes sense that it's a game thing. They're really good, and we might get to this later, they're really good about bringing in a lot of very specific details of like specific moves from the game, in addition to, you know, like some characters and like enemies and things.
I watched the show on easy mode the second time through by binging it with Magenta, so she was pointing out everything from the games, including the ice spike attack from the floating lady when they were using, I think it's Divine Bloodlines is the theme from the games that they bring back orchestrationally. Anyway.
God, I just had like the thought all at once of like how good this must be if you're already a Castlevania fan.
Oh yeah.
Like we haven't played the games. Like we don't, so it's just kind of like, oh yeah, we're taking the show on its own merits. But like, if you like the games, holy fuck, this must be incredible.
Yeah, even if it's just, oh, that's Richter from my Smash Bros. Main, like hearing his theme kick up while he's having his like big moment, that's gotta be bonkers. But yeah, so in this way, Edouard manages to inspire full-blown Night Creature Revolution 2. And obviously, it doesn't work on all of them. They go out of their way to show that a lot of the Night Creatures are like willingly serving the Abbot, even after the Abbot gets crispy fried later. They're still firmly on Erzsebet's side, but Edouard...
Class traitors.
Yeah, right. But Edouard and a lot of the revolutionaries do basically go like, you know what, F this actually. And he sings this song from the rebellion on Saint-Domingue, where basically it's like, all right, I think the way he translated it is soldiers attack those who die, so what? And it's a recurring theme that like the cost of freedom is not painlessly won. Like, yeah, bad shit might happen. A lot of these guys do die tragically twice, and it sucks. But the price of freedom is worth paying when opposing an evil like this. And I just think that that's so beautifully done. Of course, the singing, again, mwah, so good.
Incredible.
My compliments to the
all
chef.
All of the songs are either authentic to the time period or shortly after.
Yes.
A lot of them I like recognize, you know, not by name. It's like, oh, I know that too.
Oh, I recognized one of them. I was like, hey, that's Lacrimosa. I accidentally downloaded that while trying to get a different video game song called Lacrimosa.
Hilarious.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so through this theme of No Masters Fantasy Edition, Edouard inspires and leads a full-blown night creature rebellion, which dramatically weakens Erzsebet's forces in the finale, because instead of being Erzsebet and an army of vampire cultists and night creatures, it's Erzsebet and an army of vampire cultists while all the night creatures kill each other.
Yeah.
And honestly, I almost teared up when the revolutionary captain cried Liberté, Égalité, Fraternity, and we briefly saw her squad as who they were before they were transformed. Like, it got me right here, man.
It's good.
It's good. Leaving behind the fantastical elements of the world building, we also get a lot of interesting No Masters vibes from the characters. In the same vein of the people waiting for their gods to intervene, some of these characters don't set out to master others. Some of them are instead content to be mastered, to hand over control of themselves and their lives to someone who wants to command them, to willingly become a slave in the hopes of reaping some benefit, or even just avoiding the pain, fear, and punishment that comes from fighting back against evil, the price of freedom. Again,
Abbott's like, oh, won't the Lord my God send a hot vampire lady to step on me and make me kill my family? Oh God, please.
The Abbott's an interesting case. We'll get to him in a little bit more detail, I think maybe on the next slide. Any character who sacrifices their freedom and will to the control of someone else, you know, they're usually not portrayed as innately monstrous as the act of trying to enslave somebody else, but it does still serve to strengthen this overarching evil paradigm, and it can make them into a tool. So basically in this show, anytime a character willingly takes a subservient role, they better start character developing out of that fast, because it's a big red flag in this specific show. Like, following orders unquestioningly is never a good sign. And starting off, Father Goofus Emmanuel, as I affectionately call this idiot, his motivations are interesting. He is truly a road to hell paved with good intentions made flesh. He is terrified, perhaps initially justifiably, of the atheistic bent of the French Revolution and the no gods half of their motto. This is like genuinely a thing that was happening. You know, there were a ton of like church alternatives popping up after the revolution. I think part of what got Robespierre on the wrong end of the widow's window later was because he was trying to put forth his own like cult of reason thing, and it wasn't really doing so hot.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with that. I mean, even I kind of touched on this in my Rousseau-Voltaire video, but their relationship to the church is like, yeah, like religious tolerance is good because the like offices of established big religions suck, and them trying to like enact their views on everybody else is what's bad and is the problem actually. Even though I think one of them was I think Voltaire was mostly Catholic, and then Rousseau kind of bopped around because he was Swiss Calvinist. But yeah, it's a very like historically grounded motivation for him to have of like, if the revolutionaries win, I lose. God suffers.
Yeah, that's true. He really believes that the kingdom of God himself is under threat. And he's like, look, the barbarians are at the gate. I have to do what I have to do. So what he does is he throws in his lot with a bloodthirsty vampire messiah. And to his credit, he is initially planning on betraying and killing her with his army of night creatures once she has crushed the revolution for him. He's thinking of this from a very sort of top-down, tactical, like war plans, almost Carmilla-esque kind of way.
Yeah.
And he even tries to like set a boundary with her at one point, is like, you don't command me, we're co-workers, you asked me to come and I decided to come because you asked me to. I mean, he's fucking stupid. Like, obviously this was never going to work out, but his motivations at this stage are understandable. And when he changes his mind, when he's like, I can't betray her because she'll just fucking kill me, is an interesting case, because again, price of freedom is high, but he's specifically got good reason to be terrified because he made a bargain with a demon from hell to make his night creatures engine, and he knows what's gonna happen to him when he dies. So like, he has more reason than most to be kind of cowardly in the face of it. But he does also suck real bad, so like no sympathy to this guy. He entirely a hell of his own creation.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's fun. Of course, that leads to Erzsebet being like, I get the feeling this guy doesn't like me very much. We should make him kill his own daughter about it, or like hand her over to me.
Part of it is that he's fighting extremely hard to maintain a system of power in which he is in charge. The church had extreme authorities granted through the like apparatus of the monarchy.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, God will suffer. It's like, I'm not going to be in charge of anything anymore. And in order for me to maintain my place in the hierarchy, I have to set everyone below me on fire for the sake of this other person creating a new monarchy or a new hierarchy that I can maybe like cling on to my power within. So
exactly.
Even though like motivations, like, yes, valid given the circumstances as he sees them, it's very much a case where he is fighting extremely hard to maintain his own power at the expense of what he knows is everybody below him.
Exactly, yeah. And I do think that he's a very interesting case when it comes to the way he carries himself through the world. It truly feels like he could have lived a completely inoffensive life if the revolution hadn't happened in his lifetime. But the terror of it drove him to abandon his morals one by one while still thinking he was trying to be a loyal servant of God, which I just think is a very, very cool twist. And then on the flip side, Mizrak, I think I was going to do like a joke about like Mizrak Gallant in comparison to Goofus, but he doesn't have a surname that I know, so I just kind of couldn't fit it in. Anyway, so Mizrak is kind of what the Abbot could have been if he'd, tried a little harder.
If the Abbot was a Giga Chad instead.
If he hadn't been so much of a weenie. So Mizrak is a loyal servant of God by way of Father Emmanuel, and he's pretty much solidly on his side for most of season 1, and it takes him most of that first season to figure out that maybe this is like a few too many murders to constitute doing God's work in any meaningful way. And the turning point for Mizrak is, well, it's twofold. When Emmanuel is revealed to have had a daughter, Maria, he's initially like, the Abbot has no daughter, and then he turns and Emmanuel's making the most I shit my pants face that's ever been seen, and it's really fucking funny, and Mizrak is like, oh, what? This guy who I thought of as like this perfect servant of God, this person who I've followed loyally for like my adult life, has committed this grave indecency and didn't even parent the kid afterwards? What the fuck? And then at the end of that episode, Maria tries to get Emmanuel to like leave the church before the attack, and he's like, great, it's daughter stabbing time. And we see Mizrak see this happening, and then immediately he runs over to Tara's house and is like, the Abbot has Maria and is gonna sacrifice her, we gotta stop him. And like Mizrak is solidly a good guy from this point forward.
Also, fun historical fact, Mizrak is from the Knights of St. John, the Knights of Malta, essentially. Tara says he's from Malta. Samuel Dietz confirmed that he is originally Turkish, which is pretty cool.
Hey, that is pretty cool.
It's cool. His historical setting as like being kind of like a Crusader knight, a little bit out of time, it fits to kind of like run that through, okay, Knights of Malta, yeah, no, that fits within the historical setting.
Yeah, that's
also,
really cool.
It is kind of interesting because he's then on like weirdly the wrong side of the revolution, because Napoleon's whole thing when he goes to Malta is he like topples the authority of the knights and establishes French rule on the island instead. So that's who knows if they're going to get there at any point in the future, but it's an interesting thing they might potentially be setting up for later, but it's a cool way to do that character. Sorry, while you were talking, I was like, Google St. John Mizrak, where from, Turkey, question mark.
No, it's good. I love the extra context that I don't need to look up myself. Mizrak is a very interesting case because he starts off firmly on the wrong side of the story, although we don't learn that until the end of episode 1, where we get confirmation that the Abbot is in fact actively and knowingly working with the vampires, even though that seems incomprehensibly stupid by the like all the main characters are like, he's got to be on our side because we're opposing fucking vampires, so obviously he would be on our side. And the Abbot's like, well, you see, like it's that like doing the extremely complicated mental gymnastics to get to the part where supporting Erzsebet conquering the world is somehow God's plan. Mizrak basically manages to use his own moral compass to judge the actions of what's going on and basically conclude like, okay, the Abbot has absolutely lost the plot, and now we need to stop all of this. And he's kind of an interesting poster boy for the specific, like, the price of freedom is high, but it's worth the fight thing, because he is constantly trying to fling himself into danger to, like, when he sees something bad about to happen, he is constantly trying to, like, fling himself at it to stop it. And usually what happens is Olrox just shows up out of nowhere and, like, teleports him away so that he can't get his ass killed in the process. Because, like, Mizrak will truly fight anybody.
Yeah.
And he even has this conversation with Olrox, because Olrox, we'll get to him in the next slide, actually. Basically, Mizrak is like, I don't just choose the fights that I know I can win. You know, some battles have to be fought even if I don't think that I can win, which is an interesting contrast with Olrox. Again, we'll get to him later. But Mizrak is also interesting because similar to Father Emmanuel, he's also terrified of death. He gets very worried that like whatever deal Father Emmanuel made with the devil might have also included his knights, but he still continues to fight for what he believes is right because it's what he knows, it's what he's good at, and it's what he believes is the most important thing he can do.
It's also a great counterpoint to like the foil with Father Emmanuel, like, oh, he has motivations. It's like, yeah, so would Mizrak, but he's simply better. He simply didn't do the wrong thing. It's actually not that hard.
Yeah.
Or at least it's not as impossible as it seems looking at how Father Emmanuel does it.
Yeah, and Mizrak keeps trying to save Father Emmanuel and his fellow knights. Like, he reaches out to them, he tries to get them to stop, you know, he's constantly like, you know, stop this madness and pray with me. And they all refuse, and he's like, okay, I guess it's killing time. Like, he's not having a good time, but he's very strongly, like, doing what he believes is right as best he can. And then there's Olrox, again, very interesting point of contrast with Mizrak, because Olrox pretends to be a loyal servant of Erzsebet, kinda. I mean, he's not putting that much effort into pretending, but from minute one, he's like very much not shy about how he's seen this happen before, and he was one of the people on the wrong end of the imperialism, and he hated it, and it sucked. He's clearly only there because Erzsebet summoned him, and he's there to keep an eye on her and to try and find ways to subtly thwart her plans if he can. He never accepts Erzsebet as his master. He clearly loathes even having to bow to her. And in season 2, he has to be physically forced to receive her brand. And he's like, yeah. It'll fade. It sucked, though. And the thing with Olrox is that he's entirely internally motivated. He accepts no master, skeptical of all gods, physically turns into a Quetzalcoatl. So, like, we don't know how that works. It's just like, okay, he's like a vampire, a sorcerer, he does magic. Maybe that's how he does it. But, like, it's clear that he's like, I see no god here other than me. He prioritizes his own survival, except when he chooses to defend or avenge someone he loves. And even then, they're not controlling him either. He's making that call on their behalf. In fact, Olrox makes a lot of calls on other people's behalf. He opposes Erzsebet, but until the finale, he's not willing to do so openly in any way that endangers him. Basically, Olrox is like this like perfect little libertarian ideal of like, he has enough personal power and clout to be basically exempt from the consequences of the shit happening around him. And his plan for if things do go south is that he'll just run and keep running. He's like, the new world is huge, I can hide, she won't be able to find me, I'll wait her out, it'll be fine, for me specifically. He's also in a romantic subplot with Mizrak, who is, you know, not that powerful, extremely squishy, and is very much like, look, even though I could very easily die in any of these fight scenes, I still think it is important to fight because this must be fought. And it takes basically the entire series for Olrox to see where Mizrak is coming from and actually like put his ass on the line to genuinely just help out the heroes in openly fighting. Like, he does this a little bit at the end of season 1. He basically pops up into the big fight in the church in like plausible deniability smoke form, where that could be any mysterious vampire with green eyes, lightning powers, and a skull attack. It's not until season 2 that he's willing to fight openly, which is, you know, again, an interesting character arc. Like, he starts off skeptical of all attempts to master him and very much like, nah, nope, fuck this, I'll bail at the first opportunity because I don't like these guys. It takes that long for him to decide that freedom must not only be fought for himself, but also for everybody else and on the general principle of it.
We love a character arc.
We do. We do. Honestly, again, like, watching this as the Olrox show is a very rewarding experience.
It is a really interesting frame to go into it with because he shows up in such like weird, disconnected ways in season 1 that if you're not looking for it, and it's hard to look for it because, again, watching season 1 on its own without a sense of where the show's going, it is kind of hard to follow the plot. That's the experience that a lot of us had of like, I really want to like this, but it's hard to tell where it's going with it because it is abundantly a setup. It's an unfinished half of the story. And seeing how Olrox fits into it now, it's like, oh yeah, no, this is great. Like, I totally understand exactly where he's doing at every single point that he shows up, but he's such a rogue element throughout season 1 that it's just hard to get a handle on him. But once you see where he goes and his relationship with Mizrak gets more and more interesting, the whole like, get behind me, Satan. I was watching it with Cyan, and she's like, oh wait, that's sad. I'm like, yeah.
I saw it as an innuendo and cracked up, but it is also sad.
Yeah.
So, for the final exhibit in the No Masters character arc, Drolta, a weird case, who I think is very interesting, because she starts off the story when she's human as Sekhmet's high priestess, and then she turns herself into a vampire because she believes that's Sekhmet's will, and then she turns the rest of the priesthood into vampires for the same reason, and then we see her sort of steadily burn through them, trying to find one strong enough to be Sekhmet's mortal vessel, but they all explode when they drink her blood, and then she goes out into the wider world and finds Erzsebet Bathory, who is not yet a vampire, and basically goes, you seem really bad already, and you're not even a vampire yet. I bet if I turned you into a vampire, you could be exactly the kind of bad bitch that would be able to actually handle Sekhmet's blood. And Erzsebet's like, fucking obviously, what's a Sekhmet? And it goes from there. So Drolta has spent all her centuries of life and unlife as a willing servant to Sekhmet, or what she believes is Sekhmet's will. Everything she's done has been on her behalf. On the one hand, Drolta is the agent moving everything in her life forward, but on the other, she doesn't think any of it is her idea.
Yeah.
And at the final part of season 2, she pulls a last-minute betrayal on Erzsebet after seeing her fall in battle against the heroes, which is, again, it plays into Drolta's obsession with strength. Clearly, seeing Erzsebet fall and crumble is what made her be like, oh, you're not Sekhmet. Yeah, I know Sekhmet, and you, honey, are no Sekhmet.
Yeah.
So she does what, honestly, she probably could have done centuries ago. Maybe just didn't occur to her. And she drains Erzsebet of the blood of Sekhmet and claims the power for herself in her own shonen anime power-up, and makes herself into another one of Sekhmet's living avatars, leaving Erzsebet dead and discarded. And this feels like it could be an on-theme moment of power reclamation, of Drolta freeing herself from her willing servitude to Erzsebet and the seizing power of her own, but she's still the same thing she's been doing this whole time. She's still in the willing servitude to what she believes is Sekhmet.
Yeah.
She's still doing all this only for Sekhmet, not at all on her own behalf. And as the final kick in the fangs, it turns out that Sekhmet didn't want any of this shit.
Yeah.
And when she comes back inhabiting Annette's body as a vessel and basically calls out Drolta for all of her bullshit, the last coherent line Drolta has is, I did it for you. All of this, I did it for you. I thought it was what you wanted, which is heartbreaking. But again, it shows how Drolta is exactly on the wrong side of this theme, because she has dedicated 600 years of her life to trying to make this thing happen on behalf of this goddess, on the assumption that this is what she wanted. And while she was the one doing all this, while there was actually no master pulling her strings, she still committed all of these horrible atrocities in the name of a goddess that didn't want her to do them. And again, there's an interesting line when Annette finds the Orisha Ogun in the spirit world. He says, gods all over the place are being forgotten or misused by followers, priests, vampires. And I thought that framing of it, again, it's almost like the gods in their natural form are tools for humanity to engage with the world rather than powers that command them. And so the idea that a god can be misused is like, yeah, their power in the world is limited. And it does feel like there's some interesting stuff there that hasn't been fully unpacked, because Sekhmet mentioned that like she ruled on Earth until the humans found ways to betray their gods as much as they betray each other. And that's all the explanation we get. And I'd be very curious to learn what the hell that means.
Very curious to,
but like, it doesn't really matter all that much in the grand scheme of things, because ultimately all that matters is that Sekhmet's will was no longer present on Earth in any meaningful way, and what Drolta was doing was not actually invoking her will. And it is interesting, because this is kind of a side note, but I do think it actually serves the theme, which is the different ways in which Drolta and Erzsebet and Annette engage with Sekhmet. Because Drolta drinks her blood, which has been preserved after her death, or feeds it to Erzsebet and then drinks it from Erzsebet later, and then Erzsebet eats her mummified heart, which was preserved in her mummy. But Annette is the only one who goes out and finds her in the spirit world and fucking talks to her and learns what she actually wants and brings her soul into the world in a form where she can
destroy parts of her to acquire power.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. She doesn't consume her, she just becomes her vessel for a little while. And I will admit, this is an area that I only know very surface level stuff on, but one thing that I think is very interesting about the way Annette specifically engages with Sekhmet is that it seems almost like she's engaging with this Egyptian goddess through like Voodoo, because again, very limited knowledge of it, but I do understand that a large part of it is spirit possession by gods, becoming briefly a vessel for the divine. I ran into some of this when I was researching Cecile, because she was a voodoo priestess, so like her whole thing was like that. And a lot of the way she motivated the slave rebellion was, you know, through genuinely just like a voodoo ritual. And then she was like, all right, everyone, let's go kick some ass. So the way that Annette reaches out to Sekhmet by offering her body as her temporary vessel feels very in line with the magical practices that she would have been taught by Cecile, even though mostly what she does is just channel channel power from her, you know, her divine bloodline. It was a minor side note, but I thought it was really cool that she's the only one engaging with Sekhmet in terms of what she wants versus channeling her power and saying it's what she wants.
I think you're actually touching on something that might be a pretty pervasive theme, of that all of the characters in the show interact with power, or the concept of power, on like divine scales, the way they interact with power structures normally. So like Annette has the way that she interacts with her own gods, and she applies that logic to dealing with Sekhmet. The abbot has his way of interacting with God that he understands, of like, I wait around and then God does the thing that he's gonna do for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I waited around and then this tiny girl who happens to be my daughter shows up. I guess that's God telling me I gotta stab her a bunch. Every character has, I think, a version of this, and I just thought of it right now, so I can't give you a clean little map of everything, but
yeah.
I do think there is a degree to which a lot of characters bring their own kind of cultural conceptions of power structures to how they interact with the divine. Mizrak is a warrior of God. He is a crusader, so he has this idea that he has to fight for things and protect people, even at potential great cost to himself. You know, Abbot Emmanuel, very cushy in his little cathedral that he's got there.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have to do anything.
No.
There's probably more to this. It's posted in the comments.
Yeah.
But I think the aspect of Annette's background applying how she interacts with this is relevant, because Drolta, coming from a kind of like, you know, Egyptian religious power structure, even though the way they portray it in the show is a little bit wonky and about like 700 years time displaced, 700 years later than it probably should be, she's approaching Sekhmet in a way that is like how people used to call on the Egyptian gods, but that world is gone. And Drolta is holding on to that in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense here in 1792.
I also think the specific thing you brought up with the abbot is interesting, because later, when Erzsebet is like, you must sacrifice something you love, he's like, oh, of course, on the altar with a knife. She's like, no, let me eat her, obviously. She's like, you thought I wanted to kill her? Are you stupid? Obviously, I was going to turn her into a vampire. And like, that's what horrifies him, because he heard sacrifice and assumed he knew what she meant.
Yeah.
Exactly the same way he interacts with God. But yes, so finally, the last of the No Masters themes, the Belmonts, who kind of don't really play ball with the rest of the ways that this is explored in the show. You know, Richter and Just later in season 1 kind of don't really have gods that they're particularly concerned with. They don't take orders from any masters. They sort of exist outside the paradigms of the power structures that are in place. So how does this really work for them if they have nobody trying to control them? And initially I thought maybe they just didn't engage with the theme, but then I was wrong in a way that proved me right in the grander scheme, all according to my plan. So the thing with Just and Richter is that they are both traumatized by horrific events in their past, and both of them have lost the ability to use their magic due to this. And the way that they are framed is that they are controlled by their pasts and their angst, and their arcs are almost entirely centered on finding ways to overcome this and live purposefully without letting their fear control them. So with Richter, this gets resolved first. In season 1, we get the first 3 episodes where basically, like, the first scene of the show is we watch his mother get murdered in front of him by Olrox. And, like, that's obviously not good. It's real bad. And, like, we see him in that fight casting spells trying to, like, back her up, but it sort of ends up putting him in danger, and then she has to dive in to save him, and that sort of puts her on the back foot, and maybe that's why she got killed. But also, Olrox has, like, way too many fucking stupid powers, so she probably wasn't going to win that fight anyway.
Yeah,
but
Belmont was going down in that fight as soon as Olrox showed up.
Yeah, unfortunately, Olrox is kind of in a weight class of his own. So that's unfortunate. And so the next time we see Richter, he's coping great. No traumas, Richter over here. Everything is fine. Oh, he can't use magic anymore? He doesn't know why, probably. And it's very transparent. Like, it's clear that at least Tara knows, like, oh, that boy is not coping, but he thinks he is, and that's worse. But, like, he's just doing his best. He's like, yep, you know, kill vampires, have the whip, have the swords. I'm real good at what I do. It doesn't really matter that I can't do magic. I don't think about it that much, because when I do, it makes me very, very upset. So let's not. And he stops being able to deny this in episode 4 when he comes face to face with Olrox. Just kind of vibing. Like, he doesn't even attack him. He's just like, oh, hello. You got larger. And then Richter fucking runs, just straight up abandons his friends and runs away. And the shot of him like outrunning everyone else, clearing the door before them is like, oh, that's really sad. That's not particularly heroic behavior. That is terrified child behavior. And Tara and Maria are pretty understanding of why that happened. They're like, yeah, okay, that's literally the monster that's haunted his nightmares forever. But Annette is also there, and she's fucking pissed because her perspective on Richter's actions is that, like, yeah, we've all got fucked up shit in our backstories. You know, we've all got traumas. We all have nightmares. Is her exact line, and she's just unimpressed with Richter letting this control him. And the thing is, this could initially be seen as like, skill issue, I would simply not be traumatized. But again, the show goes out of its way to not do that. Because the very next thing we see while Richter is MIA is Annette goes off and runs into the vampire who killed her mother, Vablanc, the slave owner from Saint-Domingue who managed to escape. I do think that this is where we plant the seed of how Richter is engaging with the no masters thing, because he obviously isn't like choosing to abandon his allies and run for his life. You know, he cares very deeply about all three of them. He doesn't want to do that, but he is doing it because he's terrified and he's never dealt with it. So this is still basically as fresh as the day it happened. And the reason why Annette is unimpressed with this is it kind of highlights a thing she mentioned earlier, where when they were trying to make the plan for like, how are we going to get in there and deal with Edouard, who they've learned is a night creature now, and are basically like, do we rescue him? Do we mercy kill him? What's the game plan here? Basically, she's like, look, you're not cowards, you're just children. You haven't had to make the hard decisions that adults do. And it's like, ah, yes. She's like 20 and she's had to grow up way too fast. So she's like, you're all a bunch of babies who've never dealt with this. But like, she's correct. She's dealt with a lot of this stuff much more directly because she's been fighting the things that have terrified her since her mother was killed when she realized what was going on. Whereas with Richter, he's basically had the luxury of not having to fight this battle yet. You know, he ran, he didn't know Olrox was around. He's just been killing little jobber vampires with none of the same kinds of powers. And even then, he still kind of has these like little trauma flashbacks in combat whenever he's on the back foot. When he sees Annette and Edouard for the first time, they jump in and bail him out of a night creature fight he was losing. And he was having flashbacks to his mother dying, like, moments before Annette killed the thing that was attacking him and saved the day. So, like, it's still clearly very fresh in his mind. And she's not mad that he is traumatized. Annette is mad that he hasn't made the effort to deal with it in any sort of way that lets him regain any control over his life.
The problem isn't that he had a bad thing happen to him when he was like, what, 9? It's that he has chosen to not do the work afterwards, and that's the thing. And it's interesting seeing a Belmont with this kind of character arc compared to Trevor, who had
zero traumas, Trevor.
Something admittedly much worse happened to him at around the same time and had a different bad response, admittedly. But Trevor grew up basically having absolutely zero fear at all. And that's kind of his problem, is that he has no fear and he thinks nothing matters. For soft boy Richter over here, everything matters way too much. But expectations being what they are, it's interesting to see this kind of arc playing out for a Belmont, and I think it threw a lot of us off because it's like, what do you mean he's like in his feelings? A Belmont wouldn't. I mean, clearly a Belmont would. But it's so different from what we got out of Trevor in the first season, and it goes in very cool, interesting places. But,
Trevor was like, I'll keep all my feelings right here, and then one day I'll die. And then Richter was like, I'll keep all my feelings right here, and oh God, what's that? And like, he didn't have the practice that Trevor did. But this theme is reinforced when Richter stumbles on his grandfather Juste, who is similarly living in a prison of his own making. Very literally shown by like the tiny little hut he's holding up in. Having once been the protagonist of his own Castlevania game back when he was a hot young anime bishy with white hair. The white hair isn't age, he's always been like that. But after the tragic death of his wife and his best friend at the hands of a vampire, he lost access to his magic and basically hung up the whip and stopped being a hero and cut himself off from everyone, including his daughter, who was also dealing with the tragic loss of her mother and I guess presumably Uncle Maxim or whatever the dynamic there was. So he cut them off, and then when she went to the new world, she left Juste behind. Basically all she told Richter was that his grandfather was dead, and she wasn't entirely wrong because Juste basically cut himself off from everyone and just waited to die.
That is also kind of the Trevor strategy at work there a little bit.
Juste is making no choices and exerting no control over his life. He's just kind of aimlessly wandering around, killing occasional vampires when the locals pay him to. He's not even aimlessly wandering, he's aimlessly basically living day to day in the same tiny, depressing bachelor pad hut. He's entirely sunk into a hopeless despair and is essentially justifying his actions internally with the fact that heroics are pointless because it doesn't matter how badass you are in your own Castlevania game. In the long run, everyone you love is going to get fridged for drama and evil will always win. And Richter is extremely disappointed in Just for many reasons, probably one of them being not cool to look in a mirror and see this very sad case looking back, but also because Just's self-imposed isolation and actively like getting Terra to work with him on that by telling Terra, hey, I know my grandson is back in France, don't tell him where I live. Just making that call deprived Richter of his last living relative for his entire childhood after losing his mom in the most traumatic way possible. So like, he's got a lot of reason to be disappointed in Just. And Just has plenty of reason to also be disappointed in Just, but Just has more practice with it, so it doesn't bother him as much. But fortunately, Richter and Just get attacked by a bunch of monologuing vampires who take them out extremely quickly and then pin them down and start monologuing about how they're going to tortuously murder everyone Richter loves. And this is the part where the first time I watched through it, I was like, yeah, get it over with. Come on, man. But the most recent time I watched it with this theme in mind, I got to actually enjoy it, and it slapped. It was really cool. But yeah, Richter has a series of quick flashbacks to these aforementioned loved ones, emits a shonen anime power-up scream trademark, and he gets his magic back. And it starts off with what Magenta informed me was the Grand Cross move from the game, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And then he kills all the vampires while an epic cover of Divine Bloodlines blasts in the background, and it absolutely fucks. So this moment this moment goes by pretty quickly, mostly because now that he's got his magic back, it's like, okay, great, now the plot can start.
I do have to say it is a little goofy that he's like, I was going to say something cool, but fuck it. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on, Richter. Throw something better than that.
You could have just said the cool thing, you know, what? Especially because he leads it up with like, there's something you've forgotten about Belmont. Silly me, I'd forgotten it too. And then he just doesn't clarify, and then he never clarifies. He's just like, I was going to tell you what it was. But I forgot. Like, I don't know, man. Like, anything more than insert quippy one-liner here. But again, the rest of it's really good. And looking at it from this perspective, this scene of, like, overcoming his mastery by his fear and learning to take control of his life, this scene makes sense. And it gets more clarified later when he returns and explains to Annette what exactly happened to give him his magic back. And what it was is that he really made a choice about the kind of person he wanted to be, a Belmont. And basically, this is exactly what we were talking about. Like, okay, he was letting his fear choose for him, and that chose for him to just mindlessly run, book it, we have to go. And then he's like, no, I want to be the kind of person who doesn't do that, even if it's scary. I want to be the kind of person who stands and fights with his friends, a Belmont. And by making the choice for the first time, because he never really thought about it, he's like, oh yeah, I'm Belmont, I kick ass, kill vampires, whatever, yeah, I'm good at it, it's not really that hard, it's fine. But now it's like, hey, I'm faced with all these vampires that are about to kill me and my grandpa and then everybody I love, what do I do? And he's like, what do I do? Probably explode with heavenly fire and kill all of them. That sounds good, right? Let's do that. And it works. And a little bit is kind of like, okay, yeah, he had his powers, he didn't have his powers, and then he believed in himself, and now he has his powers. Yeah, okay, yeah, shonen anime, DBZ, okay, fine. But like, underpinning it is this very legitimate character theme of slowly learning to simply choose, to live with agency. Basically, he was like, do I let this happen or do I not accept it? I think there's even a line in this episode where Edouard is dealing with one of the night creatures who was a revolutionary who got killed and transformed into this like centaur man, and is like, do you accept your fate? And the revolutionary kind of looks at him and goes, no. And that is a mirror to what is happening with Richter here. It's like, do you accept what is about to happen to you? And he has to choose no. And then he's narratively rewarded with his super special protagonist boy powers. And you know what? Yeah. It's great. No complaints. And the interesting thing is that even then, he's not quite figured out why it worked, because what he says to Annette is like, I'll never let myself be afraid again. And it's like, nope, remember, the problem is not, I would simply not be traumatized. You know, we're all afraid. It just means we have something to lose. And essentially the idea is like, you can be afraid and still make the choice to act, even if the thing you're afraid of losing is very real.
It's similar to what Mizrak is going through.
Exactly, yeah. Mizrak is terrified of losing his life, but he still chooses every moment to do the right thing. And yeah, so Richter gets his mojo back and basically escapes from the trap of not having agency in his own life. And it's very funny because initially when he's like, yeah, I guess I got my magic back because narratively speaking, it had to happen at this point. And then he looks over at Just and it's like, shame it didn't work for you. But I'm way younger and hotter than you, so that's probably why. And Just is like, yeah, that's probably why. And then comes season 2, a bunch of things have happened. Terra is now a vampire, and Richter, Alucard, and Annette have to go to Paris, and they're like, we can't just leave Maria alone alone with only Mizrak for company. So he basically goes to Just and is like, Just, I need you to adopt my basically sister. And Just is like, I'm really, really bad at raising teenage girls. I fucked it up so badly the last time. What are you doing? And Richter's like, I don't have any choice, so you're gonna have to fucking deal with it.
Maria enters worst mode.
Yeah, and Maria's already in a very bad state, and it only gets worse for a while. But Just is basically just kind of like, okay, I guess I'm back in this. And like he goes and squeezes into the old anime protagonist duds and puts on his wedding ring and apologizes to his wife's grave that he has to get his ass back in the fight. And he doesn't immediately get his powers back. When he has a little fight with Vampire Terra, he's mostly just busting out like knives and shit. He's still good at it. But it's not until Maria gets her ass in way over her head and basically needs rescuing that Just manages to get his groove back. Because his problem is, again, somewhat different to Richter's. With Richter, it was that he was letting his unaddressed traumas make his decisions for him. But Just has basically just spent the last several decades cut off from everyone and passively waiting to die, letting his despair control him rather than fear.
Yeah.
So in order for him to sort of slowly climb his way back to living intentionally, he basically just starts trying to actively help Maria through her grief about her mother, and then through her rage at her father, and then through all this other stuff. And it basically doesn't work, but the important thing is that he is always trying.
Yeah.
And what ends up narratively rewarding him there is that when Maria is about to get toasty fried by her own out-of-control magic, his ability to control magic comes back, and he manages to shield them from it and save both their lives. And it's just really kind of sweet. I actually, I didn't put it in the slide, but I made a note of it because he has this absolutely beautiful monologue later in this season. So basically the episode after this happens, Just is trying to explain to Maria why she shouldn't succumb to this sort of suicidal depression / differently suicidal, because the next thing she jumps to is maybe mom can make me a vampire and we can be vampires together. And that's when Tara's like, I'm not good for her right now. I'm going to remove myself.
Maria's bouncing around between a lot of very strong emotions. It's like, I need to kill my father. I need to become a vampire.
Yeah.
I need anything else.
Well, she did kill her father, and now she's like, I've committed murder. The only approach for me is to now double down and become a vampire. And Just is like, Tara, I think you are not making this better.
Exactly,
But he has this beautiful little monologue where he says, the world can be a dark place full of horror, but if you surrender to the darkness, what's the point in living? None of us counts for much. All of us will be forgotten eventually. But there's something miraculous about us being here at all. To see this world, breathe its air, smell the forest at night, feel the sun on our skin. If we're still able to do that, there is a point in living. Yeah. And this is Just talking to himself. This is Just being like, you know what? I've spent decades in grief and mourning and just kind of dispassionate depression, but here I am, and I am alive, and the world is beautiful around me. And even if there are parts of it that are terrible, and even if I'm going to have to go, fight them head on, as long as I'm still able to appreciate the things in life that are beautiful, then there's a point to it all. And it's funny that he threw Feel the Sun in Their Skin on there just as a little snipe of like, yeah, it's Tara, sucks to be you. And it would suck to be like you. Do you get it?
And you shouldn't decide to become a vampire, Maria. Yeah. That would be bad.
But she pretends she does not hear, and then immediately is like, there is a point in living. So maybe there's even more point in living forever. And it's like, did you not hear the thing I just said about feel the sun on your skin, Maria? You gotta pay attention, man. The reading comprehension, it's so important. But yeah, so that's how the Belmont boys get their groove back. And in both cases, it's about not allowing the past horrors and traumas to control them and make their decisions for them. They still accept that these things have happened to them. It still shapes them. They still feel the pain from them, but they can choose to do things beyond just what the pain is telling them to. And that is how all of the main characters fit into the overarching theme of no masters, not even your own traumas.
What about Alucard, though?
Okay, yes, you're right. So Alucard is in this very interesting space where he feels almost completely disconnected from this theme. And I didn't give him his own slide because of that. But the thing with Alucard is that he has no masters, and he is very unimpressed with all the systems of humanity that are so obsessed with them. And I think it's because of that he feels almost intentionally disconnected from the theme. He sort of breaks the rules just by existing. He breaks the vampire-human paradigm just by existing. He doesn't try to control anybody else. Favorite uncle of the Belmont family, he just kind of dips in and out, doing his own thing, exploring the world. He's kind of just the embodiment of that thing Just was talking about, of like, as long as there's beauty in the world to experience, there's a point in living.
Yeah. I guess Alucard does fit in interestingly when we hear like the way he talks about the revolution and is tacit, like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
I don't like the king either, but I see the way they're getting a little bloodthirsty about it. I don't like I don't like the vibe these guys are starting to give. And it's tricky because he like also seeks out Robespierre. So I think the thesis on Alucard will get a lot clearer if and when we get a season 3, when they hope to God do a Symphony of the Night thing, which they've set up.
Give me brainwashed Richter or give me death. He's way too OP. He'll make such a good boss fight.
But he's so interesting in this season. He is a fully formed character, but he doesn't seem to have much of an arc.
No, he doesn't,
Which is odd. He's very much a man out of time, having gone through a lot of character development in between the original show and this one.
I actually just thought of it. I think it's very slight and snuck in there, but it is going from seeing Richter as an obstacle he needs to work around to seeing him as an ally he can trust. Okay. Like, he trusts Richter from the jump because, okay, yep, that's a Belmont. Yep, okay, great. But Richter does enough fuck-ups by showing off that Alucard is initially unimpressed with him. And that's the thing. Alucard is like, he's unimpressed with most of the systems of power present in the show. He thinks that the French Revolution is trying to do something solid, but he's seen revolutions before and they usually disintegrate after like 30 years. Like, this is old Alucard. Castlevania Alucard was like 20 and you could really tell. This Alucard has actually been around the block for several generations and has seen the world change and try to make itself better and then fall back onto old habits. And he's seen things rise and fall. And so he's like, look, they're doing something here, but I'm here to intervene with the vampires that might actually reshape the world for centuries to come. Like, what the humans get up to is their business. I'm just going to try and intervene to stop this thing. But his relationship specifically with Richter is what gets focus. Richter thinks he sees him as like a kid who doesn't really know what he's talking about. And it's clear that Alucard like sees him as a Belmont with all that entails.
Yeah.
But Richter does make some stupid mistakes and causes some problems, and Alucard is visibly disappointed in him, and Richter is visibly defensive about that. And the reason why I think this is the theme is because it's a big moment when Alucard gives him his sword. And that's got to be the buildup of the arc they were setting up for the two of them. And the moment where Alucard trusts him with his signature weapon to do the finishing blow has to be the culmination of their arc, which lets me reverse engineer that their arc is probably about Alucard learning to trust him.
Yeah.
So it's not so much masters and you know, systems of power. It's just like Alucard is this sort of weird aloof ally who doesn't follow the same rules as everybody else, and he needs to learn to see Richter as like an equal in combat. And the thing is, Alucard is crazy OP in this show. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, when he starts busting out Dracula boss fight moves, it's like,
God.
okay, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, this Alucard has had centuries to figure his shit out.
I guess the way it works is that Alucard doesn't necessarily fit into this presentation per se, because he's basically already gone past the no gods, no masters. He's kind of like if Olrox wasn't in a constant state of trying to run away. He's like, I have actually become enlightened that I do not have any masters, I do not have any gods. It is simply me and the Belmonts that I buddy up with for 300 years. So he represents like the final evolution of that character arc. And like, I'm actually extremely well adjusted now, despite how horrible I had it in the first series.
That's exactly it. I think that Alucard doesn't fit in this presentation because everyone else is sort of working out where they stand here, and he has already figured it out. He's had more time. And like, again, it almost feels like he and Annette are kind of in the same place of like, they've both already figured this out. They've done the hard part of figuring out what kind of world they want to live in and how they want to move through it. There is, however, one last character who fits into the theme in a very interesting way, and that is unfortunately Erzsebet Bathory and her stupid onion haircut. The bane of my goddamn existence, but unfortunately she is very useful in proving that I'm correct, so I have to talk about her. Erzsebet. Oh, Erzsebet. I want to say she's the worst part of the show, but it's clear that that's intentional and like they're doing it on purpose. Like,
which is also why season 1 was a little iffy, because it's like, what do you mean this stupid lady is the big bad? She's so uninteresting. Yeah, Drolta was so much cooler, and then season 2 is like, you rang.
Yeah, hello?
You said.
Did someone have a good point for us to do? But yeah, the thing is, like, Erzsebet is much less charismatic and interesting than Dracula or Carmilla or even Death, who I know I liked a lot more than you did, but like,
Barney.
Fucking Barney. But it's so funny that he still talks like that when he's a giant skeleton. With Erzsebet, part of what makes her so uninteresting is that she clearly buys her own hype, whereas Dracula, Carmilla, and Death can actually back it up. Whereas with Erzsebet, it's so transparently clear that what she's doing is borrowing power from a force she doesn't understand and being real obnoxious about it the whole time. And when you have a character like that, a main villain like that, the primary appeal is going to be their third act breakdown. And we do get that, and it is fun, and then she gets replaced by Drolta, who's a far more interesting and charismatic villain with more nuanced personality beyond just power. But Erzsebet does work as an embodiment of every single form of control that the characters in this show fight to free themselves from. She literally ticks every single box. First off, she's a vampire, the self-styled rulers of the quote-unquote natural order that we've previously discussed. She's a queen,
queen of the vampires, the royals that the revolutionaries aimed to depose. She's a goddess, the Messiah, the higher power that many characters sacrifice their free will to, absolving themselves of personal responsibility and seeking to be saved rather than doing anything to save themselves. And she's a nightmare. She's the enduring horrific trauma that is threatened to enslave every protagonist with their own terror and pain. We're introduced to her in this context through Tara. When she hears Erzsebet's name, she panics and she recounts the story. And the way Erzsebet is framed in that flashback is not as a person, but this like shadowy force reaching for her across thousands and thousands of miles.
Yeah.
And that was the part where I was like, oh, I'm onto something here, because that means the thing with the Belmonts was actually intentionally looped into the theme, because it's looped into Erzsebet. She is all of these things. And by embodying so clearly everything that our heroes have to fight, again, this is part of why she's only fun in the finale when she fucking loses and starts crying about it, because everyone has already defeated her at this point.
Yeah. Thematically, everything has been knocked out from under her. Yeah. No,
and
that's really clever.
There's even a little conversation with Cecile and Annette where her mother says, like, she's already won if you doubt your power to fight her, which is basically like, you have to believe she can be beaten before you can beat her. And that's the thing, like, all these characters have to believe she can be beaten in order to, like, muster the will to fight. And maybe she can't be beaten painlessly, maybe she can't be beaten without sacrifice, but she can be defeated because there is no part of her that is actually destined to rule the world. And that's the thing that she believes about herself. She thinks she is destined to rule the world. Her breakdown is that, like, no, I am the Messiah. I was destined to rule the world. And they're like, no, you weren't, because you just fucking took the fattest of L's and died real sad about it. And so it works really well. And that's why they had to throw in Drolta's final perfect cell form boss fight to give us like something actually cool to fight, who had nothing else to lose. Because Drolta wasn't like, I will do what Erzsebet couldn't do, I'll become the Messiah. Drolta's just like, I'm here to kick ass and take names, and I don't care about any of your names. And it's so good.
Yeah. It's interesting because like Drolta on paper is like so in subservience to the ideas of like Sekhmet and all of that stuff. But when she gets her perfect self form, she's in a way so much more self-actualized than Erzsebet is, because Erzsebet has all these layers of artifice of like a vampire queen, a goddess, a nightmare, that she is kind of projecting and playing this role, whereas when Drolta goes like sicko mode in the last episode, she's just being her worst self. She is ascended, because like she gaslight gatekeep girl bosses in the earlier sequences to like, you know, get all this power and tell Erzsebet like, oh, actually you suck, I'm amazing. And then she in turn does not have the sauce either and still gets defeated. But it's weird because like Erzsebet seems so much more in charge, but Drolta is actually so much more terrifying because she's just her. And that's all she is herself in worst mode.
Yeah, it's great. And of course, like, we get a couple phases in the boss fight. Obviously, we all know the only thing that can stop a bad girl boss with the soul of Sekhmet is a good girl boss with the soul of Sekhmet. So we get Annette coming in clutch. And then Richter gets to Street Fighter her ass into the ground after that, which is great. It's just, it's such a good fucking final boss. There's so many stages to it. I know they were watching DBZ Namek Saga before they did that shit. I can tell. It's so good. Anyway, that is the end of my presentation. I have said basically everything I wanted to say about the show and why it is good, but I did want to touch on the very last point of like, the thesis of the show is not the French Revolution was only good and fine and did nothing wrong ever. It is just the core idea of freedom is the most important thing and it must be fought for. That is the good part, and the show does a really good job of communicating it.
No, I think you're exactly right.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, good goddamn television. And to think that there could be another season. There could be more. There could be more Nocturne if they do Symphony of the Night after this.
We could get long hair Richter. We could get long hair evil Richter. You guys don't know what we're missing yet. God damn. No, it's really interesting. I'll be interested to see if they stick with this theme, because it feels like they sort of brought it full circle by the end of this. It's like, all right, we did the hard part, we did the revolutionary part, now what do we do? I mean, you know, obviously the revolution still has a fucking ways to go in you know, both Haiti and France at this point, but like, it'll be interesting. And you know, they're clearly winding up for a time skip at the end of season 2, and they could potentially do Symphony of the Night anywhere in the world. We've got Annette and Richter heading back to Saint-Domingue with Edouard. We've got Maria and Juste and Alucard hanging out in revolutionary France to see what happens next. Anything could happen. But honestly, I'm just glad we've cleared the board. Erzsebet, God, fucking Erzsebet. I'm still mad. The problem is, like,
Erzsebet is my Varney. This is how this works.
Yeah, I guess for me, the onion haircut is your stupid Varney voice thing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think that the problem is, like, they have to know she looks stupid, right?
Like, these character designers are so good at designing hot, intimidating people, and they gave her fucking onion hair. They had to know that it looked terrible.
It's subliminal messaging that she's not the ultimate big bad of the show.
I feel like that is part of it, is like, season 1 and 2 of Castlevania, we had Dracula, and he was the best villain. He's so fucking good. Like, he had layers and pathos and depth and tragedy, and like, we understood his motivations because he's an explicit narrative foil to Trevor, who feels the exact same way about humanity for very similar reasons, but Trevor doesn't let his trauma control him and is instead like, hey, you know, it sucks and people are terrible a lot of the time, but they still don't deserve to be eaten by vampires, so I guess I have to kill you. And then season 3, well, there's fucking a lot going on. It doesn't really have an overarching singular villain, to somewhat of its detriment, although I do love Little Town with something deeply wrong with it as a horror setting, so that's always fun.
Yeah.
And season 3 also has Carmilla, but nobody else is really dealing with her, so... And she's good. She's got the sauce. She's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there are 3 parallel storylines in Castlevania Season 3 that do not at any point intersect.
No, except for that one cross-cutting between the sex scene and the fight scene and the other sex scene.
Oh god, 4 parallel storylines, you're right.
We
Jeez.
forgot about Hector, yeah. And Isaac is also doing his own thing. And then season 4, Death, I think, makes a good overarching villain. And, what's the little weasel's name? You know the guy. The fucking...
Saint-Germain.
Saint-Germain! He's such a good, like, stooge villain. You know, road to hell paved with good intentions. Like, it's clear that the Castlevania series loves these guys.
No, don't give him that. Don't give him good intentions.
No, well...
Road to hell paved with brain-dead hornt.
I mean, yeah. Understandable intentions. I'm not saying the man is a moral paragon. I'm just saying I get that he's just following where his dick is leading him. I understand him. And the fact that, like, at the end, he still has a moral line that he's not willing to cross, and he actually does, well, he doesn't do the brave thing, but he does, you know, save Trevor from no longer needing to be alive to continue the Belmont line-itis, which is very deadly for Belmont mentors after they reproduce. So when we get season 1, and the only main villain that we get is Erzsebet, and, like, it's like, oh, Olrox, and then Olrox is very clearly on, like, opposing Erzsebet from minute 1. We're like, okay, Olrox isn't going to be the final boss. And Drolta has the personality and the attitude, but she's described as Erzsebet's attack dog, so I'm like, okay, so she's the Darth Vader. She's the much cooler, more charismatic one, but she doesn't really get to do anything great. And then I just have to fucking deal with Erzsebet, who, like, her like, initial Sekhmet power-up mode was kind of cool, but it's so annoying, because she doesn't get her third act breakdown in season 1. She wins. She just unequivocally wins. They Infinity Ward me, and I was so worried that they were going to endgame me too, but then it was actually good.
Yeah.
I don't know, it really does feel like they were like, how do we make this the most over-the-top shonen action anime power-up final boss fight without completely breaking the power curve of the world? And they were like, we can pull this off. We can choreograph this bitch real cool.
Oh yeah.
I strongly advise, if you have 8 hours to burn, just watch it front to back. You will pick up on so much crazy shit.
Season 1 and 2.
Season 1 and 2. I didn't realize until doing that like, oh, Richter's last words spoken to Olrox are directly quoting Olrox's last words spoken to Richter before they meet up again in season 1. Like, if you haven't watched season 1 since 2023, fix that. It really does plant everything in season 2 super well, and they flow together beautifully.
This show, like, overall, first season included, is just so, there's so much that is so good about this, but like, even Nocturne on its own as a little 2-season unit is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Even if it is not the best show ever made, it is an absolute goddamn masterpiece. It's so clean, it's so well constructed, and I hope to God we get more, but even if we don't, it's like Nocturne was incredible. It was so goddamn good.
That's really it. It is front to back rock solid. It holds up better the more I watch it. I feel like the reason why it bothered me the first time through is just that, like, I was like, there's not enough of it, and I can't formulate a finalized opinion of it because no part of it has had a satisfying ending. Like, Alucard showing up at the end of season 1, very much like, hey, did I miss all the good shit? Is like, no, buddy, you're just in time.
Yeah.
It's good, and it gets more impressive the deeper in I look, and I'm very excited to hear your thoughts after you do your full rewatch, because I didn't want to assign you 8 hours of homework for this, and it doesn't look like I needed to, which is good.
No. It's still, I mean, it's a 1 year to another season gap. That's a fast goddamn turnaround. It was like 3-4 years between the original series and Nocturne.
Yeah.
This was quick. Really well done on their part. I guess it does give credence to, like, that they may have, you know, written this in one big batch, or at least had sketched out the 2-season plan in one go at the beginning, so they didn't have to spend a lot of time in pre-production. But yeah, it's a really fucking good television show.
Yeah.
What can I say?
In the same way that a person who's played the games would probably be having a lot of yo fuck moments while, like, pointing at the screen DiCaprio style, I feel like you watching this show, same thing with all the historical elements because I was just like, haha, French Revolution, that's pretty cool. And then it's like, holy fuck, Alucard and Robespierre are on first name basis. Is Robespierre his first name?
Maximilian.
Not first name basis. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's like Olrox and Drolta fighting on Notre Dame. Like, give me all of that. Put it in my blood. It's so goddamn good.
Also, Olrox and Alucard are on single name basis. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I'm excited to see what they're setting up with. Oh, I have to tell everyone my secret, what I think they're doing to set up season 3 with weird shadow guy. Father Emmanuel made his deal with the devil too, because Olrox brings up like, oh, it could have been any of these weird demons, you know, but this guy could be whatever. And he seems to recognize him and is like intimidated. And he's like this shapeless, grinning shadow monster thing.
It's a really good effect.
My prediction is that this is Death 2. We're getting Varney back, baby.
No.
I am positive that he's gonna speak, and we're all gonna know, and it's gonna be great. Because like all we're seeing is like
Samuel and Adam Dietz, please save me from Varney
so
again.
Funny.
No.
I mean, all he's gonna do is like possess Richter and make him the final boss fight. So like he can be anybody in there as long as Richter's voice actor.
If Richter starts speaking with Varney's voice, I'm gonna snap my own neck.
Anyway, that's my prediction, and we'll see if I'm correct when we get Symphony of the Night. I'm speaking it into existence. Anyway, I think I'm out of stuff to say, and I desperately need more hot honey lemon tea because, oh boy, I've been sick for the last week. I don't know if anyone can hear it. I can hear it. But yes, I think we covered all the ground I wanted to. I have no idea how long we've been recording for. Has it been 2 hours?
2 hours on the dot.
Yeah! Okay. All right.
Bye.